There's always been a recurring question. It's been in my mind, and that's the fact that whenever a band decides to go in there and record an album basically just for fun, kind of just for them and their fans, does it usually translate into great music? This almost seems like an unfair question because basically the intentions are pure. However, whenever you're critical, such as whenever you're doing an album review or examining the work that is going to be presented or has already been presented, there's kind of a gray area. You have to kind of take everything into consideration. So for Fates Warning, who are releasing their 11th studio album, Darkness in a Different Light, their first album since FWX, which was released 9 years ago in 2004, that gray area does exist. On one hand, it would be extremely simple to merely just say that this is a good album purely based around the fact of the intentions that it was recorded upon. However, secondly, as a critic and as somebody who is attempting to let you guys, the public, the Cover Killer Nation, know whether or not this is an album that is worth exploring and kind of give you some information about it, I kind of have to blur that line. However, what I will do is I will say that for such great intentions, we're definitely appreciative. It's been a long wait. In the 9 years that have passed, a lot has kind of not gone on in Fates Warning camp. In fact, this album took about 2 years to surface. And really, if you think about it, what was happening around 2 or 3 years ago, and that was the fact that the Archmatheos album, Symphonic Resonance, just came out. And that was a terrific album. If you remember 2011's, top 25 albums list, it made the list. Not to mention, that's a review that I kind of treasure because it was a really awesome album. It kind of took me by surprise. Although I knew that the boys were definitely capable of it, considering, well, everything that they've accomplished prior to that point. But here at Darkness on a Different Light, we don't see John Arch. We're back with Ray Adler, which is fine. That's, of course, what we kind of want. Ray Adler is definitely what you think about whenever you think of Fates Warning anymore, considering John Arch was only on 2 records with them. But 9 years is a long time, and 9 years between albums can sometimes have a negative effect. It can kind of cause people to, well, maybe forget about you a little bit, or it can kind of cause a little bit of a dwindling process in your abilities. I say all of this because whenever I think back to FWX, I really like that album. Whenever I think back to I think it was Disconnected, I was really pleased with that. I was pleased with a lot of output. Whenever I listen to Darkness in a Different Light, especially right whenever it starts off with 1,000 Fires, I immediately kind of get back all of those positive feelings. There's definitely a lot of power behind this. The riffs are definitely tight. There's a very nice production quality on this that reminds me a lot and harkens me back to FWX a good bit, but also somewhat takes me all the way back to the early 1990s whenever they were producing some of their progressive metal opuses, and it's not just because it's a little bit louder and has a little bit more power and drive behind it. That's something that has kind of been omnipresent on a lot of different Fates Warning albums, with only few exceptions. However, this is one where that process definitely feels a little bit more revitalized as per usual. Firefly, track number 2, is definitely a song that follows in that same flavor. However, it's a little bit more short. It's only about 5 minutes, and actually, to me, kind of has the air of a single. This is something where if progressive metal and progressive rock had their own radio station that was being tuned in by millions of individuals, just like a traditional, radio rock station or a pop rock station, I would definitely expect to hear Firefly being played in heavy rotation, considering Fates Warning is considered one of the paramount bands of this genre of music. It definitely has a solid chorus, not to mention it just leaves you with a really good feeling. But there's where kind of my problem starts to exist a little bit for a while with this record. I feel that for a great period of this album, from tracks 3 to maybe about 8 or 9, that the album kind of lingers a little bit. And what I mean by it lingers a little bit is that it's filled with pretty much average to slightly above average material, but aside from that, it's basically just par for the course. It's business as usual. Falling is a good example of how the band is able to kind of slow things down and, really give a little bit in a short period of time. This 1 minute and 34 second long track really seems to deliver the goods in very little time and has a lot of thought and passion behind it. So this is definitely not one that needed to really be expanded. There's a deep message here. And that's something that is pretty present on a lot of these, but with the powerhouse riffs and, the semi-decent lyricism all combined together, it makes for just kind of an average to slightly above average experience. The breaking point, the make or break point, should I say, was going to be track number 10, And Yet It Moves. This track was definitely ambitious for the band because it's been a while since they've recorded something, of length. 14 minutes and 3 seconds definitely classifies as length. And I believe that the last time this happened was on Disconnected, where we saw tracks almost eclipse the 17-minute mark. So we know that Fate's Warning is certainly capable of this. I mean, let's consider, A Darker Shade of Grey, which is basically a concept album. One track with multiple parts. Let's consider the track to the Outer Gate of Dreams, which is 24 minutes in length and has about 6 or 7 parts, and is probably one of the true highlights of Fate's Warning's discography. So this is something that they are good at. And once again, they prove that with the song And Yet It Moves. And that's something that really needs to be said. This is something that has a very heavy build to it, but then does have that opportunity to slow down, kind of acoustically transition from one piece of music to the next, and then is able to continue onward. It definitely has a lot of savage power behind it while maintaining its magic throughout. And that's something that is definitely going to help this album a little bit, because up until this point, it felt like it was just kind of, as I said before, sort of lingering around and just kind of lumbering a little bit. The riffs were solid. The lyricism, as I stated, was, it was alright. But once you got through this track, you felt a little bit better on the album. You felt a little bit better whenever you left the experience. It definitely ramps up your opinion a little bit. One song can't make an album, obviously. However, this is definitely one that's boasting the case as to why this album should be picked up. While this might not be one of the best long variety songs that the band has ever done, it's definitely one that is well qualified and definitely stands out on this album. Because up to this point, the album probably would only be about maybe a 7.5. But because of the instance of this song and because of the power of it, it really kind of boisters it up to, about a solid 8. This is an album that definitely has a lot of potential going for it, but it just feels as though that, these were guys that were writing music for them. These are guys that were writing music for the fans. These are guys that basically wrote this because they wanted to get back out on the road and share this with everybody. So once again, as I stated at the beginning of this video, the intentions were definitely pure. The intentions were actually pretty darn great. You really can appreciate someone, a band or a solo artist doing something like this. However, when being critical, this is definitely one that's going to probably be along the middle of the road as far as their other albums are concerned. Some may actually put it a little bit lower than that. Some will no doubt put it a little bit higher. Personally, the way I'm going to look at it is that even though it was only an 8 out of 10 for me, I'm just happy to have Fate's Warning back. 9 years is a long time to wait for a new record. And the one that we were delivered, it was alright. Not to mention, if this means that they're going to be touring, I want to go. You should want to go too. And you should definitely check out this album. Pick it up whenever it comes out on Tuesday. It's definitely worth an explorative listen. And not to mention, it's Fate's Warning. They have been with us as a band for more than 25 years. In fact, it's coming up on 30 years. They deserve some support. And I think that we should give it to them. What did you think about the album? Leave what you thought in the comments, and let's talk about it. I'll talk to you guys later.